Good morning, and I'd like to thank you for joining us at the Greenbrier Church online. During the last few months, our country has once again found itself involved in another heated discussion about race and equality. And I say another because it's not a new discussion or a new problem. It's a discussion and a problem that our country has struggled with ever since 1776. But we're not the first country to have this discussion. It was going on centuries before we ever declared our independence. I believe it was Billy Graham who once said, "We're suffering from only one disease in this world. Our basic problem is not a race problem. Our basic problem is not a poverty problem. Our basic problem is not a war problem." Billy Graham said, "Our basic problem is a heart problem." As we continue our study of this X-rated Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is going to confront our heart problem with the sixth beatitude. And I want to be honest here and say that my struggle, and probably yours as well, is that little modifier that Jesus uses. Because if he had simply said, "Blessed are the pure, for they shall see God," well, then us religious folks would just sit back and feel justified. You see, the Gospels tell us that the religious folks that were listening to Jesus preach this sermon were experts at outward purity. They had established all kinds of rules on what you can eat and what you can wear, and even how far you're allowed to walk on the Sabbath day. And they spent so much time trying to make the outside look good that they never had time to worry about what was going on in their heart, on the inside. A quick look through the Gospels reveals the fact that Jesus often got in trouble with the people who spent their time trying to hide their, their insides by making their worship look good. And so Jesus cuts through the pretense with some of the harshest words we have recorded that he ever spoke. We read in Matthew 23, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You remove fine layers of film of dust from the outside of the cup and bowl, but you leave the inside full of greed and covetousness and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisees, can't you see that if you clean the inside of the cup, the outside will be clean too?" And he continues, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like a grave that's been whitewashed. You look beautiful on the outside, but inside you're full of moldering bones and decaying rot. You appear at first blush to be righteous and selfless and pure, but on the inside you are polluted, sunk in hypocrisy and confusion and lawlessness." While we tend to overfocus on being good people with good manners who are kind to animals and small children, God's never really been interested in reforming our manners. He wants to change our hearts. Being pure in heart has nothing to do with cleaning up our conduct or being zealous about keeping a set of rules. Somebody who's pure in heart has a heart that chases after God. Whenever we read the story of Scripture and we come across the word heart, the Bible's talking about the very center of a person, what you think and how you feel, and your motivations, your impulses, your passions. All of these things flow from your heart, the very core of your being. If you want to know what a person is truly like on the inside, all you have to do is look at the things that flow out of their heart. It's no secret that God's interested in beauty. I mean, any one of us that will slow down enough to recognize what God's created can't help but see the beautiful diversity in the colors and the landscapes that he created. Whether it's the beaches or the mountains, slow babbling brooks or raging oceans, or even the different color of the skin tones that we have. God made everything beautiful. But when it comes to his greatest creation, God is more interested in inward beauty than outward beauty. And I know that some of you work awfully hard on what you look like on the outside. We go to the gym, we watch what we eat. Our country spends millions of dollars a year on getting our hair done and buying hair care products and makeup. And some folks go and have their monthly manicure and pedicure. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Jesus is reminding us that God's kingdom is exactly the opposite of what the world values. God doesn't care what our outside looks like. He wants to see the beauty of our inside, what's going on in our heart. You see, God has always judged people differently than we do. Our struggle is that often we're so preoccupied working on the outside that we don't notice all the evil that comes out of our mouths. There are times that we, like the Pharisees, want to meticulously keep the law so that we can appear righteous. But Jesus said that they're whitewashed tombs. They might be beautiful on the outside, but inside they're filled with slander and hatred and vulgarity and abuse towards those who they claimed weren't as clean or as righteous or even like them. Our biggest struggle with this X-rated teaching is that we truly believe that we can fool everybody into thinking that we're righteous. Yet, according to Jesus, purity of the heart is doing the right thing with the right motives. You see, too many people are going to ride to a church building on Sunday in a car with a little fish or a bumper sticker on the back. They'll sing praise songs and commune around the table and bow their heads in prayer. And they'll do all of this on Sunday morning, but on Monday, they'll act just like everybody else. This is what angered Jesus with the Pharisees. You see, when we care more about looking spiritual instead of having a heart that chases after God, then Jesus would say we're hypocrites and our spiritual actions are nothing more than a play. Those who are pure in heart are striving to live up to what our mouths declare. We teach our children what we really believe about God, not because we tell them a Bible story every night before they go to bed, but they see how we actually live. We teach the truth about our relationship with God, about how we model love. I mean, it's impossible for me to teach my kids to be respectful and to love the people God loves when I find every opportunity to gossip and to lie and to slander people. If we say we love God and then we treat the people that God loves with contempt, or we look for opportunities to gossip and grumble and gripe about them, well, we're hypocrites. And we don't really know the God that we claim to love. Purity of heart is not just believing the right things or going through the right motions. It's doing the right things with the right motives, with the right heart. Because those of us that are pure in heart have a lifestyle that back up what we claim. You see, there's so many people in our community that believe the lie that being pure in heart means that we just didn't get caught. But purity isn't the absence of corruption. It's the fullness of God in our lives. I mean, if you were able to get rid of all of the impurity in your life without allowing God to fill you and to occupy that void, at best you're nothing more than a religious do-gooder like the hypocrites of Jesus' day. Purity of heart isn't the absence of certain things in your life. It's the presence of God in your life. And we can never make it to the sixth step if we've never come to terms with the first step of being poor in spirit. The process of purity begins when I fully understand who I really am, a sinner in need of God's grace and forgiveness. And then once we've allowed God to get rid of all the impurities in our lives, we have to fill that void in our soul with God. Jesus said it much better than I can in Matthew 12. He said, when an evil spirit comes out of a man, it rattles around through deserts and other dry places looking for a place to rest. But when it doesn't find anywhere to rest, the spirit says, I will return to the house that I left. And it returns to that house and finds it unoccupied, tidy, swept, sparkling clean. Well, then, not only does that one spirit set up shop in that sparkling house, it brings 7 more wicked spirits along. And the poor man, the house, is worse off than he was before. Every time we go to the trouble to root out the corruption and the sin in our lives, we're better off. But we have to find something or someone to fill that empty space. It's not enough to clean the house. We have to invite God to reside in our lives. The Pharisees were so proud of their clean houses, but their hearts were empty. Our world and our souls are not starving for more religion or religious activities or laws, because religion has never saved or satisfied anyone. Our souls are starving for Jesus. We need Jesus to take his rightful place in the throne of our heart. Because Jesus doesn't leave heaven, endure temptation, and then the torture of the cross where he died so that we could be a nice group of church folks. Jesus died so that we could be pure on the inside where God sees us the best. And after we root out the selfishness, the bitterness, and the brokenness in our souls, we need to fill them with the Creator, the sustainer of life. In our service here this morning, we sang the words of the 42nd Psalm. As a deer longs for streams of cool water, so I long for you, O God, I thirst for you. A pure heart longs for God. The pure in heart long to spend time with God every day. They have this thirst for God that's greater than any other desire in their lives because God is their top priority. And every commitment, every plan, every obligation is second to God. Those who have filled their hearts with God dwell on the things that are true and noble and right and pure and admirable and excellent and praiseworthy. You see, you strengthen what you focus on. You become what you dwell on. That's why the Bible repeatedly urges us to take captive our thoughts and our imaginations, or as Paul says, to guard our hearts. To develop a healthy focus, we've got to get stock of what we're thinking about. So, what do you focus on? What's going on in your mind these days as you sit around in this pandemic and you've got plenty of time to read and watch movies? Your imagination is a very powerful force, but you've got to have it programmed and focused on the right thing, because if you put junk into it, you'll get junk out. Those who are pure in heart have learned to turn their focus to Jesus. They know that the more that you focus on Jesus, the more like Jesus you become. And if we're going to be pure in heart, then we want to walk like Jesus walked. We want to train our minds and our hearts to focus on the things that Jesus would have focused on. And it's not an overnight job. It took your whole life to get this way. It's going to take a little while to change. I guess what I'm trying to say is that if we're going to be pure in heart, we need to empty ourselves of ourselves. In Luke 18, Jesus tells the story of two men who go to the temple to pray. One's a Pharisee, one's a tax collector. The Pharisee prays, God, how I thank you that I'm not on the same level as other people, crooks, cheaters, the sexually immoral, like this tax collector over there. Just look at me. I fast not once, but twice a week. I faithfully pay my tithes on every penny of income. Yet over in the corner, the tax collector begins to pray, but he won't even lift his eyes to heaven. He pounds on his chest in sorrow and says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus is telling the story to those of us who were a little confident in our own righteousness. There are times when I struggle feeling a little self-righteous because of all of the things that I don't do. I mean, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't cheat on Trista, I don't curse, I don't steal, so I got an awful lot of things in my favor. It's easy for me to sit back and to look at people who are broken in different ways than I am and to judge myself against them. You know, I'm a better husband, so I have to be a better person. I'm not in a position where I need to steal, so I must be a better Christian. But when we choose to judge ourselves against the world, against other broken people, it's like we're picking the low fruit off a tree just so that we can feel a bit self-assured and a bit self-righteous about how great we are, which is exactly what the Pharisee's doing in this parable. And his self-righteousness has clouded his heart. Jesus said that tax collector, not the Pharisee, went home right with God. The Pharisee comes to God with empty words and leaves with nothing. All of his law-keeping and self-righteousness was worthless. Being pure in heart doesn't come from good works. It comes through a relationship with God. You and I don't gain anything by our acts of service if our purpose is to merely exalt ourselves above other people, to raise ourselves up so that we can look down on others. The Apostle Paul says that if we're filled with ourselves, then all of the good works that we've ever done in our lives are garbage. Actually, what he writes is, I may speak in different languages of people or even angels, but if I don't have love, I'm a noisy bell or a crashing cymbal. I may have the gift of prophecy. I may understand all of the secret things of God, have all knowledge, and may have a faith so great that I can move mountains. But even with all of these things, if I do not have love, I'm nothing. I may give away everything I have. I may even give my body as an offering to be burned, but I've gained nothing if I don't have love. Honestly, I've always thought it'd be pretty cool to be able to speak in the language of angels or to have the gift and the ability to understand all of the secret things of God. But if my pride keeps love out of my life, then all of that's worthless. Pride keeps us from loving or even seeing the hurting people that fill our community. A life that's lived in humility and love receives God's approval, And the reverse is just as true. A life that's lived in vain pride and an attempt to establish our own self-righteousness will receive God's rejection and condemnation. This morning, we're about to make our way to the tables. And as we look at the emblems, the bread and the cup, we have a visible reminder that God longs to draw us to Him so that He can forgive us. But before we take those emblems, we have to be honest with ourselves and with God. Because it's not what's on the outside that matters most to God, it's what's on the inside, it's what's in our heart. Because our heart always shows the truth about who we are. So today, as we spend some time in communion together, let's take a moment to think about our hearts. We read in Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So what does it mean to you to guard your heart? And then let's talk about, if we're really pure in heart in our interactions with others, how does that change our words and our motives and our actions? And how is being pure in heart actually being countercultural? Church, I really pray that you have a great conversation around the table this morning. It's my hope that as we get around the table and we look at what Jesus did for us, that it will give us an opportunity to be honest about the condition of our heart, to be honest about how there are times that we try to work on the outside and we forget about the inside. And I hope that today, as we take the bread and as we take the cup, that we'll be able to think about what God is offering us when He offers us love and grace and mercy and forgiveness. And are we willing to give everything in this world up so that we can receive the riches that come from having a heart that chases after God? Church, you're loved. I hope you have a wonderful day. And it is my prayer that you go in peace. I'll see you very soon. Have a great day.